Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. On today's show, we find out exactly who Mike White is.
Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk. Christian Darrisaw, Kene Nwangu, Cam Bynum. Some nice parting gifts Rick Spielman left us before he left, huh? Nice guy.
Arif Hassan with Pro Football Network. My show prep is all wrong. I was prepping for White Mike.
And Luke Braun from the Locked On Vikings podcast, and I just want to send my thoughts and prayers to everyone's knees.
Yeah, we've got breaking Vikings injury news coming out of the gate. It's the Minnesota football party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next-level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hassan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome into the Minnesota football party. Hope everybody had an awesome Thanksgiving weekend with family and food and football. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Find me on the Ron Johnson Show and the Locked On Vikings postcast as well. Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk, joins us. He's at Luke_Spinman on Twitter. Arif Hassan, Pro Football Network, at Arif Hassan NFL. And Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and the Locked On Vikings postcast, at Luke Braun NFL. On today's show, we talk about the most favorable Vikings playoff matchups, the New York Jets, a team on both ends of the spectrum, and we'll talk about the best we saw in the NFL on Sunday with a Vikings-free day of football. But we start with the breaking news. Rap Sheet sends out on Twitter that Andrew Booth Jr. is having knee surgery. They will determine the procedure mid-surgery and find out if he's missing the whole year. Either way, a knee surgery on November 28th, not great for Andrew Booth's outlook this year. Luke Inman, that's your guy. You've been begging for him all year. You got him, and he hurt his knee. This has got to be a tough blow for not only your morale, but for Andrew Booth.
Yeah, that one stings quite a bit, obviously. Not a great start to, obviously, Kwesi's first draft class, but we did talk quite a bit about injury luck. It was just, a couple weeks ago, Vikings were one of the better injury luck teams. Obviously, they're kind of regressing back to the mean a little bit. Remember, that was one of the big reasons he even fell down to 40 was multiple injury concerns. Certainly not the start you wanted in his career, but hopefully he can get back healthy and come back strong next year.
Yeah. Did play 68 snaps in that Dallas game, which is apparently when it happened. He didn't play against New England. So that is Seen out, Booth out. Caleb Evans' health is going to be critical this week against the Jets, or else it's going to be another Duke Shelley game and Tay Gowan game for the Vikings potentially. Arif Hassan, is this, do you think, sign or foreshadowing of things to come for Andrew Booth, who had major injury issues coming in?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he had a number of injuries coming in. I remember when we were interviewing him coming in from the Vikings draft, talking about those injuries, like, hey, is this a concern? Or do you have, clearance to ever play? What's going on here? And he said, this is the first year he's ever been fully healthy since, high school, which, of course, that turned out not to be the case. He wasn't going to be healthy that year. But that's alarming, right? He hasn't had a healthy year of football play since his junior year of high school, which is coming on 6-7 years now. I can't help but think that this is a sign of things to come. For 90% of players that we talk about when we talk about injury proneness, that's usually variance at work. Sometimes a player will see 2 injuries or 3 injuries in a short period of time. We think that they're injury prone when in fact they're not. I think the best case example of that is Matthew Stafford. Early in his career turned out to be an Iron Man after the first couple of seasons, right? But for a player like, say, Percy Harvin or Andrew Booth, these injuries pile up and they contribute to each other again and again. It's not a problem with the player. It's that the injuries themselves are creating more likelihood for future injuries because they weaken ligaments or muscles or bone or change the type of motion that the player goes through and change kind of the load that they put their knees or ankles through. I think a good example of that is Greg Childs, who had an ankle injury in college that contributed to a patellar tendon tear in college, which led to a bilateral patellar tendon tear in the NFL. If you remember Greg Childs, 4th-round pick for the Vikings. So these things can build up in ways that are kind of unexpected. That ankle injury forced him to change his running style. That change in running style was not healthy for him, and that led to a cascade of problems. I see that my guess is that something similar is happening with Andrew Booth.
This is a long-term thing for Andrew Booth. Who knows, right? But like, I see too much from fans of people being like mad at Andrew Booth over this, and like the same thing with like Irv Smith and anybody else that gets hurt a lot. Calm down. It's not his fault, man. Like, he's doing his best to not. He's not getting injured on purpose, and I feel like people see it as like a failing of the player when they get injured. It's like, should he have worked out his ligament more? Like, there's not really that much of a preventative way. If anything, it's because he tried too hard to play through injury when he was younger.
Shouldn't have tried so hard. What the hell, man?
Coming back. Yeah, he should have been lazier. Gosh, Andrew Booth. I don't know. Like, calm down. Especially if you're like not a player. Like, if you're like me, if you weigh under 160, you don't get to get mad at players for being injured.
No, well, that puts me under the threshold.
We're all out.
Too. Darn it. Let's level set things. So the Vikings are 9-2. They had a mini bye. Good chance to take inventory of where they're at, get a chance to see the rest of the league. So now that you've had a chance to digest the Thursday game, take a look at where the Vikings sit. What is the most realistic outcome for this Vikings team in the postseason? There is going to be a postseason, almost definitely, 99% chance the Vikings will be there. What is the likeliest scenario once that occurs as far as where they end up in this thing? Arif, let's start with you.
So I think that most likely the Vikings will end up with a second seed. That is probably not an enormous surprise, right? You know, the Eagles are probably going to have the top seed as the division winners of the NFC East, the Vikings the division winners of the NFC North, and then you're left with basically the NFC South, right, which is just a mess. They could end up with a division winner that has a losing record, and the NFC West, which is fairly unimpressive as far as the top level goes, at least in terms of the record, right? And so I think that I'm not going to say they're locked into that second seed, but it's the most likely. So they'll have home field advantage all the way to the conference championship game should they get there. I am concerned that they'll get punked by an NFC East wild card. And so I think that they probably, win. Maybe they win that first round, but I don't see them getting past the divisional round. I think that that's probably the most likely outcome for the Vikings at this point, which, for me, I feel like that's optimistic, right? I feel like, I've been talking about, the potential for a first round loss all this time. I think that the Vikings have something in them that they could win that wild card round, but it is tough for me to see them winning that divisional round.
Braun?
Yeah, about the same. I figure like if you go with just who's favored in all the rest of the games, Vikings will probably be favored in the rest of their regular season games. I think the hardest one to be favored in might be the Jets, maybe the Giants, but both those are at home. Same with the Eagles. I think they're favored in the rest of their games. So that gives you the 2 seed. And that gives you whoever the 7th seed is in the wild card round at home. So that means it's not very likely that you have to play like Dallas. It's not very likely that you have to play like San Francisco. That's going to be the Commanders. That could be the Giants, who have a tough schedule coming up, who might fall away a little bit. They might even fall all the way out of playoff position. So yeah, I see a playoff win and then another home playoff game against a tougher opponent. That's when you maybe get the Cowboys or the 49ers or whatever. That is a much tougher game to win. But again, home in the playoffs doesn't seem that crazy. I don't know if they would be favored against the Cowboys at home, considering what happened last time. I don't know if the betting market would, but I don't think it would be like a 2-score spread or anything like that. Like, you're not looking at it as an impossibility. But in terms of most likely scenario, yeah, I guess beat that 7 seed and then tough game in the divisional. That would be hard to get past that part.
Yeah, probably don't catch the Eagles. Sucks because, by the way, was it 2 years ago? Both the 1 and the 2 seed got the bye, but you look at their schedule. I still think the 2 seed awfully attainable. Guarantee a few home games. That first game, looking at teams like, we'll get into it, but Washington or Seattle, maybe Atlanta sneaks back in. Feel fairly confident about that, knowing you're at home. But like these two just said, I'll kind of echo it. Once you get in that second round where you're looking at Dallas or San Francisco, I mean, those teams scare the heck out of me, even at home. Knowing you have the home field advantage certainly helps, but I think this is a team that, unless we see some more improvement defensively down the final stretch, playing teams that you just don't seem to match up well against, teams with great offenses and can get home with a great front four pass rush, that concerns me quite a bit. So knowing you'll likely have to beat either Dallas or San Fran and then go into Philly, I mean, as much as we say the NFC is wide open this year, those last 2 games to get to the promised land feels awfully tough, given how they've played against those teams already. Saying that, the Philly game you can almost throw away at this point because this Vikings team is night and day beyond where they were in week 2. The Dallas game, though, That's a lot tougher to shake off at this point in the season. Let's see how they finish this final stretch and see if they can build off last week's win a little bit, because the plan all along was, no matter how they started, just on paper with a new coach, new system, they should be playing their best football at the end. And just like this is a much better team than in week 2 that got smoked by the Eagles, you hope by the time the season ends, they'll be even better than they are now. So that second round and on kind of scares me, but that could change by the time we get there too.
Yeah, I have serious concerns about this defense holding up for 3 games to make it to a Super Bowl. But I think the 2 seed is like an 80% lock at this point. Think of it this way. The Eagles are basically 2 games away because they have the tiebreaker. So if the Eagles lose 2, which is realistic, the Vikings would have to run the table. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I mean, I think more realistically the Vikings lose 2 of their own, then the Eagles would have to lose 4. That's not happening. However, I think that same logic applies to the 49ers catching the Vikings. 49ers are 2 games back. I don't think they're going to be 2 games better than the Vikings in the final 6 games. That would mean the Vikings lose 2 and the 49ers run the table. And they've got a tough stretch coming up. So I think that 2 seed is almost locked, to be honest with you at this point. I think there's a better chance that they catch the Eagles if the Eagles go cold in this 3-game road trip, but I don't think it's a high likelihood. So why don't we do this? Why don't we pivot into rank 'em your ideal first-round matchups for the Vikings? Right now, it would be the Commanders. Is that the ideal matchup? Is there another team you would prefer to play of the realistic teams? So I think the Giants would be in the mix. The Seahawks would be in the mix. I don't know if I'd put the Cowboys in the mix, but you can throw them in there as well. Falcons, maybe. Who would you like to play in the first round, Inman?
Yeah, I think the wheels are slowly falling off for the Giants. And given their injuries they've dealt with too, by the way, can't really blame them. But I think them or Washington, knowing you've already beat them once despite the refs doing everything they could to help those Commanders, those are the 2 teams I think they match up the best against in round 1. Seattle, Tampa, kind of right behind them in that second tier. Seattle not only has the weapons and talent, DK, Lockett, Kenneth Walker, but you never want to play a team that's playing with kind of house money in the playoffs because they got nothing to lose. Everyone knows they weren't supposed to be here. So I'd much prefer to play a team like Washington or New York than Seattle or Tom Brady, even if he isn't playing normal Tom Brady football, because you just never know.
Yeah, I think actually I would not mind playing Tom Brady given how that he's playing. I think we should consider Dallas as an actual possibility. I know that right now they're the top wild card. But, things could go awry. The New York Giants could beat them, right? It is entirely possible that they slip down a ranking or 2. I mean, right now, I believe the playoff picture has 5, 6, and 7, the rest of the NFC East. So it is Dallas, New York, and Washington. And I think Dallas would be the worst of the realistic possibilities. And again, I do think it's realistic. After that, I agree with Luke that Seattle is probably the next worst matchup. I mean, that defense can sometimes just give up on them. I mean, there have been at least three games this year where the defense has just been catastrophically bad in baffling circumstances. But beyond that, I mean, they've got a great group of rookies on that defense and, frankly, on the offense as well, that I think would make it a difficult matchup. I think that after Dallas and Seattle, I probably would be more worried about the New York Giants just because of how good that coaching is and how effective they've been able to use Daniel Jones and the fact that they seem to be getting healthier as opposed to more injured. Wan'Dale Robinson, for example, has come on strong the past couple of weeks, even though he didn't really do that against or against the Cowboys. So after that, that's probably where I place Tampa. And then after that, I'd probably put Washington. And then, Atlanta, if like that's a possibility, right? If Washington loses out a couple more games, Atlanta happens to win a couple, Atlanta's got the possibility of getting a 7 seed. So that's probably how I rank that group.
You'd rather play Brady than Daniel Jones?
I'd rather play the current constitution of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers than the current constitution of the New York Giants. Plus, take a look at the statistics. I think that Daniel Jones has much better expected points per play than Tom Brady does. I mean, there is a threat there, right? And the Vikings against running quarterbacks. It's not.
If only Brady had like a career to look back on and wonder if he might be able to
just to
perform
lean
in the
on
postseason.
a little bit there. Yeah,
just some
the Bucks.
experience.
He signed his
I
divorce
wonder
papers.
when
He's fine now.
He's good now.
Yeah.
They might have just lost Tristan
what?
Wirfs for the year too,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
If only
think, like,
we
4
had
weeks
some
was the-
evidence as to
Oh,
whether
okay.
or not we should trust career playoff performance or season-long performance heading into the playoffs, which one tends to predict a little bit better. If only someone had done that kind of work and informed my opinion about whether or not they should play Tom Brady at 45 years old. But alas, we have no idea.
Alas.
Alas.
Someday someone will do that research. Luke Braun, what do you think?
Here's what I want. I want Atlanta. I want Atlanta to win the NFC South because they're not good, but they might win it anyways. And then I want the Cowboys to end up in the 6th seed and beat the 49ers. And then the Atlanta Falcons to upset whoever gets the 5 seed and then make it to the divisional round. And then the Vikings win their game. That would set up the Vikings in the divisional round against Atlanta. And then the Cowboys and Eagles play each other, take each other out for us. And then we can get to the NFC Championship. That's what I want.
Yeah, and to your point too, Sam, just trying to figure out Eagles, Cowboys, how many more losses realistic. Cowboys, Eagles do play each other one more time, so one of those teams obviously has to lose. And then Eagles play the Giants twice as well too, so that could go either way as well too.
First
Luke,
round Washington.
So your
second round
preference
Falcons.
would be Washington first round and then the Falcons in the second round to get to the NFC Championship.
However that may
game. Is
happen.
that
about-
correct?
How about Giants first round? Because I don't believe in them at all. And then the Falcons. Yeah.
What are the reasons
let's
that you don't
fraud
believe in the
patrol.
Giants that you do believe in the Vikings?
Pass rush? Or I thought you were going to end that sentence with Commanders. And like everything that has made the Vikings fraudulent, I feel like the Giants have been worse about.
Worse.
Like I feel like all
They're
their
like
wins
the
are
same
stupid.
team
Yeah.
with a slightly worse quarterback that knows how to run the ball.
Yes. That. the worst
They're the
quarterback.
same team.
The worst quarterback part.
But with a worse quarterback. Yeah, so of course I believe in the team with the worst quarterback last. Yeah.
Better offensive line. Better offensive line.
The Giants have wins
than like Blake Brandel or whatever, right? Come on. Andrew Thomas is up there with Christian Darrisaw.
Andrew Thomas is up there with Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't believe in the Giants.
Okay.
They haven't sold me.
Saquon Barkley, 200 yards against the Vikings in the playoffs.
We'll see. If the Vikings go to Detroit and lose by like 3 scores, then we'll have this conversation.
Gonna have a
Entirely
Brian
fine
West,
to look Lions.
a Brian Westbrook kind of game on the road for the
2008
Vikings.
playoffs.
Yeah.
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 Oh wow, we'll get a repeat of 41 donut, huh?
Now we're gonna repeat.
Is T-Jack also going to be the quarterback? Rest in peace.
I would love to see Kirk Cousins throw some jump passes in homage.
That's his next act.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think. Well, he's getting more mobile all the time, guys. Look out.
that's true. Yeah, he's making some plays.
What'd you like about watching football yesterday? I love non-Viking Sundays because it gives me a chance to kind of take inventory of actually what's happening in the NFL. I don't watch the all 22 of every game like Arif does because he has a national writing job. I loved seeing 2 teams go for 2 at the buzzer, basically, to win the game. That was awesome. Trevor Lawrence was nails down the stretch, and he zipped that ball in on the 2-point conversion. I don't know about the call on the touchdown. I'd be a little upset about that if I were the Ravens. But love the decision by Peterson. Love the decision by Staley to go for it because the Chargers actually have something to play for and something to lose. And Staley, I knew I could trust him. I knew I could trust him to make that decision, and he did, and they pulled it off. I loved seeing that. What did you guys like about your Sundays?
Yeah, you're right. What a great week to not have Vikings football, just kind of watch the landscape of the NFL. I think 10 of the 14 games were decided by one possession. 2 of them went into OT. You already mentioned the 2 walk-off winners on the 2-point conversions, Jags and Chargers. But I think out of all of them, it was the Sunday night game, Green Bay Philly. That was just wild because you got to see Jalen Hurts rewrite the record books, 158 rushing yards. And then you got to see Jordan Love come in for Aaron Rodgers. Actually look a little sharp, even if it was against Philly's prevent defense. So the drama that's now going to ensue in Green Bay, it's just going to be awfully fun to watch for Vikings fans in the NFC North.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should talk about Green Bay before it gets too far away.
That's
but
what I
Reeve,
was
talk
gonna
to
say.
me about well, let's do it now. Let's talk about Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers has a rib injury and a broken thumb. He says he wants to play this week, and he wants to play as long as they're still in the playoff hunt. That might not be long. Is this it for Rodgers in Green Bay? And if you're Green Bay, would you go forward with Aaron Rodgers? I'm not sure they have a choice.
What's the dead cap? If they just let him walk next year, what are we looking at? What's the dead cap?
It depends on whether or not he's retiring. If he retires, they can recover
Yeah,
some of that based off of like signing bonus arbitration.
Yeah.
Do you have either
Jason
or if he retires
from,
or if he walks?
99 million dead cap next year.
Stop it.
Still
Jason
better than
Fitzgerald,
9
the
million
cap,
dead
did an
cap.
article
Yeah.
about how they can recover it. It's still like 40 million over 2 years. Like that's the best they can do. But they can like rework some of that. I feel like I was watching the Sunday night game and I was like, okay, I guess we got to go Packers, right? We need the Eagles to lose. And like by about the middle of the second quarter, I was just like enjoying the Packers' demise. I can't do it. I tried to root for the Packers. I couldn't do it.
They made it a ball game, though. I mean, it was 20-20 there for a bit. They came back a little
Well,
bit at the
great
end,
game.
and then they just couldn't stop the run. Any concern that Jordan Love, is he going to be the next legacy guy?
I mean, the odds seem really low, right? Like, even if we don't fall into the trap of saying, well, what are the odds that they get, 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in a row or 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks? I mean, these odds are fairly independent of each other. And if they're not independent of each other, they're dependent in the wrong direction, i.e. the idea that Green Bay might be able to have a particular talent for finding quarterbacks, right? So even if we ignore that, right, the odds are pretty low that a guy who doesn't get significant snaps after his first year, even knowing that he's behind a Hall of Fame guy, is going to be the next coming. I mean, his statistics this year are fantastic. He's also had 18 passing attempts. His preseason has not been fantastic. His camps have not been great. He started off his rookie year as the third stringer behind a person, I believe, named Tim Boyle. So
A human being
happened.
named Tim Boyle, a Homo sapien.
Yeah, certainly Tim Boyle existed because he later appeared on the Lions roster. But next to such notable humans that definitely exist, like David Blau. So
He doesn't exist.
I find that
Key to the Vikings. David Blau. Key to the locker room.
yeah. Purdue legend, the best quarterback Purdue has ever produced. Don't fact check that, please.
Just trust me.
I guarantee
But
it.
yeah. But no, I find it pretty difficult to believe that somebody who's had to stay kind of benched for that long, especially in the modern NFL, has it. I had so many concerns about him coming out as a rookie in the draft anyway. Let's assume that draft evaluation is still relevant at this point in the process because we know very little about Jordan Love, and I just he's one of my least favorite first round picks at quarterback in a little bit. Although my least favorite turned out to be an MVP candidate in Josh Allen. So what do I know?
I feel like if Taylor Heineke suited up and had that exact same game that Jordan Love had, we would all be like, yep, normal Taylor Heineke game. Make of that what you will. He has won
Sure.
5 of
Yeah,
6,
why not?
Taylor Heineke.
Maybe
got that
it's
locker
not.
room
Only team he couldn't beat was Kirk Cousins and the Vikings.
There you go. Maybe it's
The
not Jordan Love they
anti-revenge
should be
Taylor
concerned
Heineke.
about. Maybe it's Christian Watson, who has a 50% rate of converting catches to touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. He has 12
Speaking
catches
of
and
sustainability.
6
Specific
touchdowns.
stat. The last
Very
3 weeks?
explosive touchdowns, by the way. He's a big play
Yeah, I
machine.
remember Jeff Janis too, man. I remember Jeff Janis. Don't worry about it.
Jeff Janis. Arizona
Aldridge
Cardinals
Robinson
playoffs.
level.
Divisional round or whatever. Yeah, unbelievable.
Right, yeah. For the purposes of my takesmanship, I will have to defend the argument that Christian Watson is garbage and will always be garbage and is no good at football. And why was he even draftable? No,
We're taking that clip out of context and putting it on social media.
You've been
AJ?
arguing sustainability stuff all year. This is right in
Yeah.
there.
What, that like a backup quarterback throwing to a receiver that wasn't able to play in training camp after people have stopped playing against a backup safety is not really good indicator of how good a player might be. That he had 30 yards before that 63-yard touchdown pass after the catch. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's not a ton of arguments I have about Christian Watson. Maybe the fact that he always seems to drop the first target headed his way seems to be kind of an alarm bell that should be ringing. I mean, drops don't matter until suddenly they do. I think that, I found that, for the most part, drop rate does not tell us about how quality a receiver is, what their impact is on winning, until you get about to the 12% mark. And Christian Watson is real close. I mean, he's past 12%, but he's real close to just being that kind of alarm bell. I think that one thing that a bunch of the drops don't matter guys found out after they started following the spring leagues is that the reason drops don't matter is because they don't matter for receivers that happen to crack the starting roster. Once you don't crack the starting roster and you drop the ball all the time, you matter a lot. If you ever, I don't know how many of you ended up watching a significant number of AAF, XFL, or USFL games, but games were swung not by how talented the quarterback was, although Case Cook is, but by how good those receivers were at just holding on to the ball, man. The drops matter after a certain point. So Christian Watson concerns me because he's not technically developed. He is just a pure athlete. We've seen a bunch of pure athletes in Green Bay fail out before. That includes not just Jeff Janis. That includes Charles Johnson, who used to start for the Vikings.
Oh, God.
That's Torrey
Starting
Gurley.
wide receiver
I remember
Charles
him from way
Johnson?
back. Starting wide receiver Charles Johnson. So
Friend of the Ron Johnson show. Be nice to Charles Johnson.
Winner of the Laquan
I
Treadwell
like
camp
Charles
battle?
Johnson. He has a phenomenal personality, and he was the best receiver in the AAF that year for the Orlando Parlos, but did not pan out as a starting receiver for the Vikings. But yeah, I mean, we've seen a bunch of super athletes not do well after having some highlight performances. This is just not enough for me to be concerned about Christian Watson yet. Plus, I mean, he went to a school that just that has not put a good player in the NFL yet. So
anyone
crazy
watch
that I
the
can say that actually.
anyone watch the end of the Bucks-Browns game? Yesterday was about 4th and 12.
Yep.
The first drop I've ever seen Amari Cooper make.
Yeah.
Not contested, no defender around, wasn't trying to turn up field too quick. Just the first, just
Did you
plain
miss
old
Amari
simple
Cooper's
drop.
rookie year?
Yeah, I don't remember that. Yeah. What happened?
He got traded from the Raiders because of drops.
A lifetime ago. I saw that, Luke, but then I saw him make amends in overtime, big catch and run, which put him in position to win. But how about the Njoku catch, though, to tie the game?
That was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. Man, I'm so glad that Jacoby Brissett's going to be the starting quarterback for the Browns for the rest of the season. There's no way that could change in the next week, and no reason that one would make this a talker. He's just played so well. I don't know why you would replace him, especially given how great of a guy he seems to be.
Yeah, at this point of the year, I don't know what could change now at this point to see any type of quarterback controversy whatsoever. I completely agree.
But no, I mean that was a great throw from Brissett to David Njoku. That Bucks-Browns game, despite going into overtime, is maybe one of the most boring one-possession games I've seen in a while. I'm so glad it finished with that touchdown at the end. I mean, because it was such a slog. And another reason I'm not that concerned about the Buccaneers, right, is that they couldn't do that much against a backup quarterback without a ton of support, if I'm going to be completely honest. Obviously, they have a great running game. But, yeah, that's the game ended really excitingly. I'll say that. And, I mean, the Packers-Eagles game, for all of the excitement it provided Vikings fans for either helping the Vikings get that first seed or seeing a Packers loss, basically a win-win for Vikings fans, also just turned out to be a super exciting game with a bunch of lead changes. A ton of fun to see that.
73 points in that one as well. Today's episode is brought to you by betonline.net. It's your number one source for all sports wagering information. You can get football lines, basketball lines, soccer lines, World Cup, and esports. It's all at betonline.net. Vikings and Jets, Jets, Jets. -3. The Vikings are favored with a 44 over-under. So really about the same as the Patriots line on Thursday. Vikings -155 on the money line. We will have our gambling picks on Thursday. You can get that line and all the NFL lines, plus plenty more, at betonline.net. Get it on your mobile device as well. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Let's talk about the Jets, fellas. Mike White beats the Bears yesterday, who started Trevor Siemian. That's a blast from the Vikings past as well. Rainy day in New York. Jets looked good. Defense looked good against a bad team. Offense looked good. Elijah Moore got involved. Mike White over 300 yards. Who is Mike White? Arif, you seem to have a Mike. You kind of have a beat on Mike White. I feel like I just know it. Give me the Mike White lowdown.
Well, so Mike White he was a super productive guy at Western Kentucky. I mean, I think a lot of people remember Bailey Zappi for producing like insane yardage over at Western Kentucky. Mike White did it first. He is somebody I remember scouting him in the draft. It was either Eric Galko or Matt Waldman, who was like, hey, there is something in this guy, because, a lot of these guys are really difficult to scout coming out of that system where you're throwing for like 5,000 yards. You're always in shotgun. But that's what the NFL kind of looks like right now. Obviously, it's not like the air raid exactly. I mean, we're seeing how the air raid fail in Arizona. But he did a pretty good job making decisions quickly enough in an offense that changed in front of, like, the receivers would change into option routes fairly often. His performance under pressure was a big question. I remember that being kind of like you didn't get to see a ton of pressure. But he was somebody that I think he replaced not a Heisman candidate, but a pretty good receiver candidate in Quentin Flowers at South Florida before transferring over to Western Kentucky. So he was somebody that ended up with kind of a fair amount of draft pedigree to go into it. But overall, I mean, a lot of the quarterbacks coming out of the system are somewhat similar in that, sometimes they get stuck on that first read. Sometimes they don't have, as big of an arm as you might want. That's why they get recruited into these programs as opposed to programs like in Clemson or the SEC. And I think that, kind of like Gardner Minshew, it's kind of the same thing here where, he sometimes shows really good anticipation, but he does have some trouble getting off his first read. He doesn't scramble quite like Minshew. But in this game, we were able to see what that decisiveness meant. What was interesting about White is that he has had, I want to say, 5 games or 6 games where he's thrown at least 10 passes. And in 3 or 4 of those games, he has got like a 100+ passer rating. In the other 2 games, he has a passer rating below 70. His ability to make quick decisions sometimes extends into his ability to make bad decisions quickly. And so that is kind of the thing that you would want to take advantage of if you're game planning against somebody like a Mike White. I don't know. I kind of like him a lot, but I think it's pretty clear that, he very obviously is a 5th round pick. And I mean, he's won the Jets locker room, right? That's worth something, right? But, clearly he's not going to be a long-term solution for them. But if he's not going to be a long-term solution for them, I don't know how much better that offense is going to be. We saw, the Washington offense get a little bit better with Taylor Heineke in there instead of Carson Wentz. I think in this case, we'll probably see the Jets offense get a little bit better with Heineke than with Wilson. But you're losing a lot of the big play potential that you got with Zach Wilson. Then again, Garrett Wilson did have a number of pretty big plays in this game. So it is possible that the Vikings could get burned. But I don't think it'll be deep. I don't think it'll be like yards after the catch type stuff.
Yeah. So I was told that Skylar Thompson was the greatest thing since sliced bread when they played Miami. Is Mike White greater than or less than Skylar Thompson? That is the bar for all third-string quarterbacks that play the Vikings. Braun, do you have a beat on this?
I don't have great Mike White takes. that said, I'm going to go with
All right.
less than. Skylar Thompson was slinging, man. I don't know if Mike White has that in him.
Skylar Thompson.
I loved him for that.
Was the PFF quarterback leader in like every PFF was obsessed with him. He was outstanding for PFF's gradings. I remember him coming out of 2018, Mike White, that is, and remember 2018 had this crazy quarterback class, 5 go in the first round: Baker, Darnold, Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar, and then it was like Mason Rudolph by himself in like the second tier.
That's right.
And then Mike White, top of the third tier with like, who else was drafted? Kyle Laletta, I believe, was the other one drafted ahead of him.
Oh, yeah.
But I just remember, so it was like 3rd, 4th round grade. He ends up going the 5th round to Dallas. I just remember the baseball background people kept bringing up, that he could have went that route, maybe had a shot at the MLB. You kind of see the arm strength. He's got a good fastball. Some of those throws yesterday, absolute bullets, chunk plays in the middle of the field. And from everything I've seen and remember, when he's got time in a clean pocket, he can make a lot of throws. But where he's always kind of struggled, like a lot of guys, especially young guys in the NFL, pressure gets in his face, pocket starts to get a little muddy, tends to fall apart a little bit. I remember at Western Kentucky, he took a lot of sacks. It was like 45 sacks or something like that. Not much mobility at all.
Yeah, he has like negative 270 rushing yards, right? Because they count sacks as rushing.
Yeah, something something crazy like that.
Yeah.
So not a lot of mobility, pure pocket guy. Protection breaks down. He just kind of really relies on that arm strength to bail him out. So, I look at the Viking game, I guess. I know Za'Darius is a little hobbled around on one knee, but you still got Hunter, Wanham, Patrick Jones. It's one of your better depth positions is your edge rushers. Hopefully the Vikings can get after him early and just try to rattle him a little bit, even if that means maybe giving up a big play or two, as opposed to playing that soft coverage. We see a lot just rushing for, letting him get in a rhythm early on the road, because he's got the arm strength for sure. And now he's got weapons. Unlike last year, didn't put up good stats. I think he started 3 games, played in 4. Not good stats, 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, something like that. But he's got better weapons now this year. And if Mac Jones and the Patriots offense can move the ball in this defense, then I'm sure they're watching the tape this week saying, we can score some points too on this Vikings defense. He even got the corpse of Elijah Moore resurrected back to life yesterday. That guy was ready to sit out on the bench, for the year just 3-4 games ago. So between him, Garrett Wilson, who else they got? Corey Davis, Tyler Conklin. I think he's got enough weapons to move the ball. If, again, he's got that clean pocket that he needs.
Tyler Conklin revenge game. Mike White has thrown multiple picks. And up until yesterday, that is, had thrown multiple picks in each of his starts where he didn't get hurt in the first quarter. So like you said, kind of sloppy with the ball last year. Did have a 400-yard game that came out of nowhere. I think he led the league in yards that particular week. But the Jets, going into yesterday, were 32nd in offense per PFF. First in defense per PFF. So polar ends of the spectrum. I guess it kind of comes down to, do you think the Vikings can move the ball on a really good defense again? The Cowboys said, nope, you can't move the ball. Patriots, they moved it great. The Bills, they moved it fantastically. So can this offense get points on the board and get a little distance between themselves and Mike White, force Mike White to make some sloppy throws? What do you like about the Jets' defense, Bron?
Sauce. In the draft, I said that if I had the number 1 overall pick and I were the Jaguars, I would have taken Sauce. And that feels like it has borne out. He's insane. So I think the key to that is going to be either, like, as just a neutral football fan, I kind of just want to see what happens when Justin Jefferson goes against Sauce Gardner. Like, let's see that rookie really get tested,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
As a Vikings fan, I want them to keep him away from Sauce Gardner. Will the Jets allow that? Will they just have Sauce follow Jefferson everywhere no matter what? How are they going to approach that? I think that's going to be a huge key. And then it's also, we're still kind of in the middle of this like D-line gauntlet with like the Bills have one of the better D-lines, the Cowboys, the Patriots. Like, these are some pretty incredible pass rushes. And against Dallas, it ended up defining the entire game. The O-line had a disaster class that would make 2016 TJ Clemmings jealous. But like, can you avoid that again happening at home against the Jets? Can you keep Kirk Cousins clean? And can you find Justin Jefferson ways to get open? Or can you just accept that one-on-one and maybe Justin Jefferson beats Sauce Gardner? That would be dope. There's a whole bunch of ways for this to go. But I don't know. The Jets have like a lot of different threats at kind of every level on both sides of the ball. They definitely feel like a little more real. And I feel like if they weren't in the division they were in, I feel like we'd be talking about them more.
And this is
and if they had
Salah's
like
thing,
a real
right?
quarterback.
Salah generates pass
Yeah.
rush. Salah is a defensive-minded guy. This is kind of what they expected from him, right?
Yeah, I think so. And what's really cool is that they've turned some players that were having good years before Salah arrived into having great years, or even players that were not remarkably well regarded into really high quality starters, right? So like Quinnen Williams, for example, might be playing like the best defensive tackle in football. That's not an exaggeration. I'm not saying that Quinnen Williams is playing good, and I'm using hyperbole to say that he might be playing better than Aaron Donald right now. He might be playing better than Aaron Donald right now. He is having a phenomenal season. On the edge, they've got a first-round pick in Jermaine Johnson. He's actually not playing all that great, but that doesn't matter. They've got John Franklin Myers, who's doing a fantastic job. No one's ever heard of him. He's one of the league leaders in pressures right now. He's got a great PFF grade. I know that, that's something that people like to research going into it, and he deserves it. He's playing really excellent football. They've got a really deep edge group, right? If Jermaine Johnson, the first round pick, is, or one of the 3 first round picks, is kind of like behind the group. I mean, they've got Bryce Huff is doing stuff. They've got Michael Clemens doing stuff. It's like they've got all kinds of players that are willing to rush the passer. They've got the capability to rush the passer. That after you take that first line out, they've got a second line willing and able to continue to put pressure. This is kind of one of the things about say for example that Bills pass rush, right? That front line is fantastic with Ed Oliver and Von Miller. When he's healthy, they've been able to do a bunch of really great stuff, AJ Epinesa, but the depth issues that the Bills have had, both because of injury and just because of the nature of the depth that they have, kind of like the Vikings, once you get out of that first group, it's not that great. The Jets don't have that problem. As soon as they get into that second defensive line rotation, they're really fantastic. And so that to me is the bigger concern. But I should add that, when I mentioned players that were pretty good or kind of good, having really high quality seasons, DJ Reed, at the other side opposite Sauce Gardner, is having a really great year too. And so you've got 2 corners that are playing really well. You don't know kind of, hey, is DJ Reed playing well because the pass rush is playing well and Sauce Gardner is playing well? It doesn't really matter because the fact is that pass rush is going to be there, Sauce Gardner is going to be there, and so it's going to be really difficult to find ways to get open. Yeah, I would take Justin Jefferson against DJ Reed for sure if you got that matchup, but it's not as if you're moving away from, like Patrick Surtain to the second corner on the Broncos. It's not as if you're moving from, the top corner that some of the teams like, the Patriots, for example.
It's no Jair Alexander to Eric Stokes.
Yeah. Hey, Eric Stokes is injured. Be respectful. But no, yeah, exactly. Moving from that top corner to the second corner typically is a huge problem for the Jets. It's not a huge issue. And so they're pretty good in a lot of areas. They're getting production out of that linebacker group. I mean, they're seeing, players like CJ Mosley do some stuff. It is kind of fun to see kind of what those linebackers can do. Quincy Williams, I believe, is back again healthy. Quinnen Williams' brother, who was drafted by the Jaguars like in the 3rd round or something crazy like that. He's playing pretty well, especially as a pass rusher when he's blitzing. So they've got players at all levels that are performing within their roles really well, that make it pretty dangerous to kind of deal with. That said, I don't think that they're the best defense in the NFL. I think the Vikings have already played that in Dallas, right? I think that, the possibility exists that it's Denver. I mean, this defense does have some holes in it. I mean, John Franklin Myers is great, but he is not, Bradley Chubb or Von Miller or anything like that. Well, I guess Bradley Chubb's no longer on the Broncos, but, he's not like an elite edge rusher, right? Quinnen Williams is playing, the best football, that we're seeing out of the defensive tackle this year, but he's not necessarily paired with a monster in the same way that when Aaron Donald was paired with Michael Brockers, you got to see, some really high level quality defensive tackle pairing. So there are some issues on the defense, but I mean, it is a top 5 defense. It's going to be hard to find ways around it. I think that probably you want to rush to the edge, maybe with some wide receiver end arounds and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're just going to have to trust that Justin Jefferson is talented enough to get open, because I think the Jets will trust their own defense to do some one-on-one matchups.
Coming up next, we've got Nerdy Stat of the Day and then Party Fouls to close the show. But first, let me tell you about Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Time
Analytics fans rejoice. It's time to get educated.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind right now.
With the Nerdy Stat of the Day.
It's the best graphic. I can't. Every time.
It just
The
tickles
little
you,
heads
doesn't
going
it?
up the chart.
You love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Check us out on YouTube, by the way. Like, comment, subscribe. Arif, your nerdiest of nerdy stats. Let's bring it today.
This is probably mid-level nerdy. I've gotten nerdier. I've gotten less nerdy. This one is just a comparison of the way the Vikings special teams have done based off of, different measures that one would use. So expected points on special teams. The Vikings rank 5th in the NFL. For people, again, unfamiliar with expected points, it is the concept that on average an NFL team will score certain points given a certain field position down and distance. So 1st and 10 from the 25, the average NFL team scores, say, 1.9 points or something like that, right? So if, for example, on a kickoff return, you return the ball all the way up to the 40, that over the course, the average, expected points off of a kickoff might be, 1.8 because most of those end in touchbacks. Maybe because you've brought it to the 40, you've increased the expected points to 3. That is 1.1 additional points you've added to the team based off of your kickoff return. So that's a pretty good example of what that means. So the Viking special teams unit is 5th in the NFL in expected points added. Some of that has to do with stuff that is not sustainable, things like block kicks and punts, things like fumbles that they've recovered, but that the Vikings have, when the Vikings fumble, they recover their own fumbles. When the Vikings force fumbles, they're also the ones that recover them. Some of that's not sustainable, right? And so that shows up in stuff like the Vikings special teams grade on PFF, which I believe is 23rd or 24th in the NFL. That is not a great special teams grade, despite how well the special teams are doing. The biggest difference, of course, is Greg Joseph, who is PFF's lowest graded kicker on field goal and extra point kicks, not kickoffs. He's doing well there. The reason that there's such a disparity in expected points versus PFF grade is because PFF grade cares a lot about that specialist grade in their rankings, but expected points don't actually ding Greg Joseph too much. Why? Because he's missing extra points, which, they're worth a lot. They're worth an entire point. The expected point on an extra point is about 1. But if you add 5 extra points, right, if you add 5 expected points to the Viking special teams expected points overall, they're still 5th. Right? Because there's a little bit of a difference between them and 4th. I think it's about 7 points. And the field goals that he's missed have all been 50 plus. Those are low expected point field goals anyway. So the drop in expected points is relatively small. That's not to say the Vikings shouldn't find an alternative solution to Greg Joseph this offseason or figure out what they can do to fix Greg Joseph. A couple points here and there does mean a lot, and it changes kind of the tenor of the game if you miss some extra points. But overall, the Viking special teams unit is stellar, and I think that needs to be recognized.
Super nerdy. Luke Braun.
That's not, I don't think, quite as nerdy as like deep special team stats. I got a question a lot about why Mac Jones wasn't under more pressure against the Patriots, and the answer is that they got the ball out quick. Mac Jones got the ball out, according to PFF, 2.56 average time to throw, 2.56 seconds. That was 6th fastest in the league for week 12. But it wasn't all like tiny Mickey Mouse, like quick game stuff. There were 8 passes, including 2 touchdowns that went beyond, that were completed beyond 10 yards. So there are pretty big existential problems with the way that the Vikings are playing zone right now that the Patriots were able to exploit, and they were able to exploit it fast enough to still have like quick game rhythm in terms of the pass protection, and the pass rush like still had like no time to get to the quarterback, even though you're able to throw deep, which is supposed to be the whole like trade-off, where the deeper you throw, the longer you have to hold it. The Patriots kind of got their cake and ate it too, and that's why they were able to move the ball down the field. And that, I think that is the most like pressing issue facing the Vikings right now, is how do you get that intermediate level to not be so wide open immediately, where the things that Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter are doing, Za'Darius in particular is doing something very special right now, and a lot of it is going to waste because the Vikings can't cover worth a damn.
Yeah, Za'Darius still had 5 pressures in that game. I think people were tweeting, Za'Darius isn't making an impact. He's playing hurt. 5 pressures is a pretty good performance, even though he didn't really get home.
You cover reasonably, he has 12.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like, he was beating the guy immediately every time. The ball is just out.
My nerdy stat of the day, 3 and out totals. Minnesota Vikings offense and defense both very poor in this particular regard. On offense, they are tied for the 8th most 3-and-outs in the league. They are tied with the Saints at 32. The leader in the league, by the way, is the Panthers at 39. Fewest 3-and-outs, the 49ers. Just 14 of them this year. How about on defense? The Lions have forced the fewest 3-and-outs in football. They have forced just 15. Tied for second, the Vikings and Bears. Not great if you're an NFC North defense. The Vikings and Bears have both forced only 19 3-and-outs this season. Number 1 in the league, the Broncos. Number 2 in the league, the Packers. They have forced 36 and 35, respectively. So the Packers give the NFC North a little bit of respectability there. But, if you're the Vikings and you want to, extend drives more often than you are, that'd be nice. If you want to get teams off the field faster once in a while, that'd be nice. But a couple of alarming trends there on the Vikings side of things. Not a very positive stat there if you're a Vikings fan. Let's end it with party fouls and then hit the road for today. Luke Inman is having technical difficulties, and he is endeavoring to get back with us. But let's cue up the party fouls music and run it.
It's time to tell you who spilled their proverbial drink on the sofa. Get ready for this week's party foul.
Luke Braun, kick it off.
So sad.
Yeah.
Mine is going to go to the Chicago Bears, who are, I'm going to say, that's got to be their rock bottom, right? The Jets benched their healthy quarterback to get him right. And by the way, the Jets' party line here is Zach Wilson. We think we can fix him. He just needs to not focus on game plans for a while and get his mechanics right. They chose you to do that against. They chose your game, and you lost by 3 scores in the rain to Mike White. You got rid of every good player you had to fix a salary cap situation that wasn't even that bad. And now teams are willfully sacrificing their chances to win your game and still winning it by 3 scores. The Bears need to do some soul searching or go join the XFL. Get out of my league.
Coming in hot. I like it.
Whew, okay. I was just trying to get all of the details correct for my party foul. It was the way Todd Bowles managed the game against the Buccaneers. Let's see if I can get this. For the Buccaneers against the Browns. Let's see if I can get this right. So they had a 4th and 2 at the Cleveland 37 in the middle of the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter. That would have been a 54-yard field goal. That is within Ryan Succop's range. That's fine. It is a tough field goal to make, but most coaches in the modern NFL would opt to kick that field goal. Instead, they intentionally took a delay of game penalty to move the ball back 5 yards so that they could punt it. Of course, that game ended in a tie, so those 3 points would have been really nice. But also, we did see the one last chance they had with 32 seconds left. Again, I'm taking a look at this other screen to see if I can get this completely correct. They had all 3 timeouts remaining, and Tom Brady under center. And, I've been digging on Tom Brady all year for his performance, but there's one thing that you kind of want to count on him for. It is that fourth quarter comeback. We've seen comebacks with 13 seconds left, 17 seconds left, 20 seconds left. 32 seconds seems like it is trivial to try and get within field goal range. They did not try to do that. Instead of using any of those timeouts, they hurried up to the line of scrimmage to run a play, burned 12 seconds for no reason at all, then finally snapped the ball. It was a deep pass from Brady to Julio Jones that ended up picking up 26 yards. Could have used those 26 yards with a little bit more time. That is when they used the first timeout with 8 seconds left on the clock. Again, they had 3. They only used 1. They could have been closer with 20 more seconds on the clock if they had done that. So there were 2 seconds left in the game. After that, there was after that play, which is an incomplete to Cameron Brate. Would have been nice to have been able to run 2 more plays. They were not able to. They ended up having to run a Hail Mary with Tom Brady's arm. So, which didn't work out. Obviously, they ended up going to overtime. The Cleveland Browns ended up winning the game. Todd Bowles mismanaged that game egregiously in a way that is very annoying, given kind of, I don't like Tom Brady. I like to see him lose, but I don't like to see him lose like that. I want to see him lose on his own recognizance. I want to see him lose on his own talent. Let's go with that word.
I don't mean to pile on red zone here because a lot of people are, But I, like many, didn't get to watch the Josh Jacobs 86-yard run yesterday because of NFL Red Zone policy that once you get down to the final game, you have to cede to the local affiliates. Well, the only markets that had that game were Seattle and Las Vegas. There were really no one in the Midwest was going to see that. No one on the East Coast saw that. You had to have Sunday ticket or you had to have the local game on your affiliate. But Scott Hansen, he told us, he said, go to your CBS affiliate. We went to our CBS affiliate. It was 60 minutes. I love 60 minutes, but not when there's an overtime game, 34-34. I wanted to see the end. And I had to see it after the fact on Twitter that Josh Jacobs got loose for 86, gave the Raiders the win. And
got over 300 scrimmage yards.
Yeah, holy cow. Big
Wow.
game for Josh
Yeah.
Jacobs. He's
11th player in
he's
NFL
kinda-
history.
Yeah, trying to save Josh McDaniels' job. But that was a party
God,
foul
rip
on
the
Red
girl's
Zone.
soul.
They do a lot of great stuff. I love them. I don't want to rip them, but I got to rip them for that one.
I don't know if it's on
We never
Red
got
Zone
Luke
so
Inman
much
back.
as it is on like the negotiated policies in CBS, right? CBS should have just aired the game.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
think
it's a
it
league
was
issue.
ultimately. Yeah, I think it was ultimately admitted that Red Zone made a mistake, but like, that mistake came from like somebody made a mistake, and Red Zone should not have cut away from that game because it was not national. Like, it was
I
a
didn't know that.
miscommunication.
Okay.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
Scott Hansen
Right,
tweeted
'cause-
something about how like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that, and then he also basically said like, but that order came from on high, not my problem.
Yeah. Scott Hansen,
my
you are
hands.
precious. No one is blaming you.
Yes.
You're a national treasure. So I guess party foul, the last one goes on Luke for leaving us during this part of the show. So we hope to see him again on Thursday where we make our gambling picks. We talk more about the Jets and we'll
Second party foul on Luke for blaming someone else for his problems, by the way. I won't say who.
That's the Minnesota football party for today. He's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings Postcast and Locked On Vikings. Arif Hassan, Pro Football Network. Go check out his work. A happy belated Thanksgiving to all.